In the autumn of 2019, a routine archaeological survey in Millbrook, Connecticut, uncovered something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about life, death, and the boundaries between them. Beneath the gnarled roots of a centuries-old oak tree, researchers discovered the skeletal remains of a young woman, carefully arranged in what appeared to be a ritualistic burial. But it wasn't the bones that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. It was what lay clutched in her skeletal hands. A leather-bound diary, impossibly preserved, with entries dated from 1856. The final entry, written in a steady hand despite the horrific circumstances it described, detailed the woman's own death at the hands of her neighbors during what should have been a celebration of harvest. The most disturbing part? According to forensic analysis, the diary was written after the woman had already died. This is the story of Elizabeth Hartwell, a 23-year-old woman whose final words were penned from beyond the grave, describing a harvest festival that transformed into something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. What you're about to hear challenges the very foundations of what we consider possible. This is not fiction. These are not legends. This is a documented case that continues to baffle experts and raises questions that may never be answered. October 15th, 2019. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been leading archaeological surveys in rural Connecticut for over 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for what her team would uncover that crisp autumn morning. The dig site was unremarkable, a small plot of land where the town of Millbrook planned to build a new community center. We expected to find pottery shards, maybe some colonial-era foundations, Dr. Mitchell later recounted. What we found instead was a burial that defied every protocol we knew. The oak tree stood majestically at the center of the proposed construction site, its massive trunk easily 6 feet in diameter. Town records showed the tree had been there since before the first European settlers arrived, making it well over 300 years old. Local regulations require the archaeological survey before any construction could disturb such an ancient landmark. It was graduate student Marcus Chun who first noticed the anomaly. His ground-penetrating radar detected an unusual void directly beneath the tree's root system. When they began carefully excavating, they discovered a perfectly preserved burial chamber, lined with stones and sealed with what appeared to be a mixture of clay and organic materials that had somehow prevented decay for over a century and a half. The skeleton was positioned in an unusual manner, not the typical Christian burial posture of the era, but rather arranged in a fetal position with arms crossed over the chest. Carbon dating would later confirm that the remains dated to approximately 1856, consistent with the dates found in the diary. But it was the diary itself that stopped everyone in their tracks. Bound in leather and wrapped in what appeared to be oilcloth, it survived in near-perfect condition. The pages were filled with elegant handwriting in faded brown ink, detailing the daily life of a young woman named Elizabeth Hartwell. Dr. Mitchell's hands trembled as she read the first entry aloud to her team. "My name is Elizabeth Hartwell, and I fear I may be the last to remember what truly happened during the harvest festival of 1856. If you are reading this, then my death was not in vain, for someone must know the truth of what occurred beneath this very tree." The final entry, dated October 31st, 1856, was written in the same steady handwriting despite describing the author's own brutal death in horrifying detail. Forensic handwriting experts would later confirm that all entries were written by the same person, using the same ink, despite the physical impossibility of writing after death. Local historian Margaret Thornton, when shown the diary, immediately recognized several names mentioned in the entries. These were real people, she confirmed. The Hartwell family lived in Millbrook in the 1850s. Elizabeth was listed in the town records as having disappeared during the autumn of 1856. Her family searched for months but never found her. The discovery sent ripples through both the archaeological and paranormal research communities. Here was physical evidence of something that should have been impossible, a first-hand account of events written by someone after their death, corroborated by historical records and forensic evidence. But the mystery deepened when researchers realized that Elizabeth's diary didn't just describe her death. It provided a window into a side of 19th century rural life that had been carefully hidden from official records. Elizabeth Hartwell's diary entries from the summer of 1856 paint a picture of a young woman living in a community where ancient traditions ran deeper than Christian faith. Born to a farming family in Millbrook, she was well educated for her time, having been taught to read and write by her mother, who had come from a more prosperous family in Boston. The early entries describe typical concerns of a young woman in rural Connecticut: helping with a harvest, attending church services, and the subtle courtship rituals of the era. But as summer turned to autumn, Elizabeth's observations became increasingly disturbing. August 20th, 1856. Mother's been acting most peculiar since the new moon. She spends hours in the root cellar, and I can hear her whispering to something down there, though I know she is alone. When I asked her about it, she looked at me with eyes I did not recognize and told me that some traditions are older than the church, older than memory itself. Elizabeth wrote extensively about the preparations for the annual Harvest Festival, an event that appeared to be far more significant to the townspeople than she had realized. Unlike the simple community celebrations described in other historical accounts, Elizabeth's diary reveals a festival steeped in pre-Christian rituals that the community had maintained in secret for generations. September 3rd, 1856. I discovered why Father has been spending so much time with Mr. Whitmore and the other town elders. They are planning something for the Harvest Festival that they call the Old Way. When I pressed Father for details, he told me that some years require special offerings to ensure the continuation of prosperity. His eyes held a fervor I had never seen before, and it frightened me deeply. The diary reveals that Elizabeth had begun to suspect that she had been chosen for something specific, though she didn't initially understand what. Strange symbols had begun appearing on trees around the family property, symbols that seemed to converge toward a great oak tree that stood at the edge of town. September 15th, 1856. The dreams have become more vivid. I see myself standing beneath the old oak, surrounded by the entire town. They are all watching me with expressions of reverence and hunger. In the dream, I am not afraid, which troubles me more than if I were terrified. It feels as though something else is controlling my emotions, preparing me for what is to come. Elizabeth's entries describe a gradual realization that the entire community was involved in maintaining traditions that predated European settlement. The Millbrook area, she learned, had been considered sacred by the indigenous peoples who lived there before colonization, and the European settlers had apparently adopted and adapted these ancient practices rather than replacing them with purely Christian traditions. October 1st, 1856. I confronted Mother about the true nature of the Harvest Festival. She wept as she told me that every generation, the land requires a sacrifice to maintain its fertility and the community's prosperity. The chosen one is always a young woman of pure heart and strong spirit. She told me that I should feel honored, for I will become part of something eternal, something that connects our community to the very essence of life itself. The most chilling entries describe Elizabeth's growing understanding that she had been selected not randomly, but through a process that had been ongoing since her birth. Certain signs and characteristics had marked her as suitable for the role she was expected to play. October 10th, 1856. I now understand why I was never permitted to marry, why suitors were always turned away with explanations that never quite made sense. I was being preserved for this purpose. The mark on my shoulder, which Mother always told me was a birthmark, is actually a symbol that appears only on those chosen by the land itself. I am not the first, and I fear I will not be the last. What happens next in Elizabeth's story challenges everything we think we know about the nature of consciousness and death itself. But before we continue, we want to hear from you. What do you think about what we've revealed so far? Do you believe that entire communities could maintain such dark secrets for generations? Have you ever lived in a small town where you felt like an outsider to something the locals all understood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help other viewers process this disturbing revelation. October 31st, 1856. The final entries in Elizabeth Hartwell's diary describe the events of that fateful night with clarity that forensic psychologists find both remarkable and impossible. According to handwriting analysis, these entries were written during and after the events they describe, yet they maintain the same steady penmanship throughout. Even during moments of extreme physical trauma, the sun has set, and they have come for me as I knew they would. I write these words as they lead me through the streets of Millbrook, my neighbors and friends transformed into something I no longer recognize. Their faces are painted with symbols that seem to move in a flickering torchlight, and their eyes hold a collective hunger that speaks to something far older than human civilization. Elizabeth's account reveals that the Harvest Festival was actually a carefully orchestrated ritual that the entire town participated in. Every man, woman, and child had a specific role to play in what they believed was essential for the survival and prosperity of their community. Mother walks beside me, her hand on my shoulder, whispering words of comfort that sound rehearsed. She tells me that I will not truly die, that I will become part of the eternal cycle that has sustained this land for countless generations. Father carries a carved wooden bowl that has been stained dark with the offerings of previous festivals. I count at least 23 different stains, each representing a young woman who walked this path before me. The procession led to the ancient oak tree, where Elizabeth describes a scene that defies rational explanation. The entire community had gathered in a perfect circle around a massive trunk, and the tree itself seemed to respond to their presence. As we approached the oak, I could feel something awakening in the earth beneath my feet. The tree's branches seemed to reach toward me, and I swear I can hear voices whispering from within its bark, the voices of all those who came before me. They are not crying out in pain or fear, but rather singing a wordless song that fills me with a strange sense of peace and purpose. Elizabeth's description of the ritual itself is both detailed and impossible. According to her account, she remained conscious and continued writing even as the ceremony progressed to its deadly conclusion. They have laid me beneath the tree now, on a bed of leaves and flowers that have been gathered over the past month. The entire community surrounds me. Their voices join in a chant that seems to resonate from the earth itself. I can feel my body becoming heavy, but my mind remains sharp and clear. Elder Whitmore approaches with a blade that gleams with an inner light, and I understand that this is the moment of transition. The most disturbing aspect of Elizabeth's account is her description of remaining conscious throughout her own death, experiencing it not as an ending but as a transformation into something larger than her individual existence. The blade has pierced my heart, and I can feel my blood flowing into the earth beneath the tree. But I do not feel pain. Instead, I feel connection. I am becoming part of the network of life that sustains this land, joining the consciousness of all those who have made this sacrifice before me. I can feel their presence welcoming me, and I understand now why they were not afraid. Elizabeth's final entries describe events that occurred after her physical death, written from a perspective that challenges our understanding of consciousness itself. My body lies still beneath the oak, but I continue to exist. I can see the community completing the ritual, covering my earthly form with soil and stones while singing songs of gratitude and renewal. I feel no sadness at leaving the world of the living, for I have not truly left. I have simply expanded into something greater. Thank you for staying with this video until this point. We truly appreciate your time and your willingness to engage with this disturbing but fascinating story. We promise you that the most incredible revelations are yet to come, and what you'll discover in the remaining chapters will challenge everything you thought you knew about the nature of life, death, and consciousness itself. The most extraordinary aspect of Elizabeth Hartwell's diary lies in what she wrote after her physical death. Forensic analysis confirms that the ink used in the final entries is identical to that used throughout the diary, yet these passages describe experiences that occurred after her heart had stopped beating and her body had been buried beneath the oak tree. November 1st, 1856. I write now from a place that has no name in the language of the living. My hand moves across these pages, though my body lies still in the earth below. I have discovered that death is not an ending, but a doorway into a broader form of existence. The consciousness that was Elizabeth Hartwell has not ceased. It has simply been freed from the limitations of flesh and bone. Elizabeth's posthumous entries describe a form of awareness that encompasses not just her individual experience, but the collective consciousness of all those who have been sacrificed beneath the oak tree throughout the centuries. Through this expanded awareness, she gained access to knowledge about the true history of Millbrook and the ancient compact that bound the community to the land. I can see now the truth that was hidden from me in life. The indigenous peoples who first lived on this land did not simply disappear when European settlers arrived. They made a bargain with the newcomers. They would share their sacred rituals and the responsibility of maintaining the land's fertility in exchange for being allowed to continue their spiritual practices in secret. The harvest festivals are not European traditions at all, but ancient ceremonies that have been passed down through countless generations. Through her expanded awareness, Elizabeth revealed that the ritual sacrifices have been occurring for far longer than anyone in the community realized. The oak tree itself was not just a witness to these ceremonies. It was an active participant, a living repository of the consciousness of every woman who had been offered to sustain the land's prosperity. December 1st, 1856, I have learned to communicate with the tree itself, and through it, with all the others who have walked this path before me. There is Sarah, who was sacrificed in 1823, and Mary, who gave her life in 1834. Each of us retains our individual identity, while also becoming part of something immeasurably larger. We are the guardians now, the watchers who ensure that the compact between the community and the land remains unbroken. Elizabeth's entries describe a form of existence that transcends traditional concepts of life and death. She writes about being able to observe the daily lives of the townspeople, to influence the growth of crops and the health of livestock, and to communicate with future generations through dreams and visions. January 15th, 1857. The community prospers as it has not in decades. The harsh winter that has devastated surrounding towns barely touches Millbrook. Our crops from the harvest have remained fresh far beyond what should be possible, and the livestock are healthy and productive despite the bitter cold. The sacrifice has accomplished what was meant to do, but at a cost that the living cannot fully comprehend. Perhaps most remarkably, Elizabeth's diary contains accurate predictions about future events in Millbrook's history. She described the Civil War before it began, predicts specific weather patterns, and even provides details about technological developments that would not occur for decades after her death. March 1st, 1857. I can see the threads of time stretching forward from this moment. A great war will come that will tear the nation apart, but Millbrook will be largely spared. Our young men will return home safely, protected by the power that flows through this sacred ground. In 30 years, a railroad will be built that passes just to the north of town, but the tracks will curve around our borders as if guided by an invisible hand. The diary reveals that each sacrificial victim was chosen not just for their purity and spiritual strength, but for their ability to serve as a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Elizabeth describes her role as both guardian and guide, helping to maintain the delicate balance that keeps the community prosperous while preparing for the eventual selection of her successor. The process has already begun to identify the next chosen one. She is currently just a child, born this past summer with a mark upon her shoulder that indicates her destiny. I watch over her as the others watched over me, preparing her gradually for the role she will one day fulfill. The cycle continues, as it must, as it has for countless generations. But Elizabeth's story doesn't end with her acceptance of this eternal role. Her final entries hint at a growing awareness of something darker underlying ritual, a realization that would have profound implications for everyone involved. Elizabeth Hartwell's final diary entries, written nearly a full year after her death, reveal discoveries that cast the entire history of Millbrook in a sinister new light. Through her expanded consciousness and ability to perceive across time, Elizabeth uncovered truths about the harvest rituals that even the community's elders did not fully understand. October 1st, 1857. I have delved deeper into memories held within the oak, and what I found fills me with a horror that transcends death itself. The compact between the original inhabitants and the European settlers was not a willing partnership, as I had believed. It was coercion, maintained through fear and supernatural manipulation. The land does not require these sacrifices to remain fertile. The entity that feeds on them does. Elizabeth's investigations revealed that the oak tree itself was not a benevolent guardian, but a conduit for something far more ancient and malevolent. The consciousness that she and the other victims had joined was not a natural part of the land's ecosystem, but a parasitic entity that had learned to sustain itself through ritual murder disguised as spiritual necessity. November 15th, 1857. The truth is more terrible than I could have imagined. The entity that has fed on generations of young women is not of this earth. It arrived here centuries before human settlement, drawn by the natural spiritual energy of this place. It has learned to manipulate human communities, making them believe that their prosperity depends on these sacrifices, when in reality, the entity simply requires a life force of the innocent to maintain its existence in our realm. Through her posthumous investigation, Elizabeth discovered that other communities throughout New England had been similarly manipulated, each believing that their unique traditions were necessary for survival, while actually serving as unwitting hosts to parasitic entities. The network of connected communities stretched far beyond what any individual town realized. December 31st, 1857, I have made contact with others like myself, women who have been sacrificing communities throughout the region. We are all trapped in the same web of deception, our consciousness-bound entities that masquerade as benevolent earth spirits. The true guardians of this land, the indigenous peoples who originally lived here, were driven away not by European expansion alone, but by their refusal to continue feeding these ancient parasites. Elizabeth's most disturbing discovery was that the entity had been growing stronger over the centuries, and that its influence was beginning to spread beyond the boundaries of individual communities. She realized that her own role was not as a guardian protecting the town, but as a component in a larger system designed to harvest human spiritual energy on an ever-increasing scale. February 14th, 1858. The entity has begun to suspect that I have uncovered its true nature. It attempts to cloud my perception and limit my ability to communicate across time. But the strength of my will, forged by the knowledge of truth, allows me to resist its influence. I must find a way to break the cycle before another innocent girl is chosen to replace me in this terrible role. Elizabeth's final entries describe her desperate attempt to find a way to break the compact that bound Millbrook to the entity. She discovered that the ritual sacrifices were not just feeding the creature, they were gradually transforming the community itself, making the residents more susceptible to supernatural influence and less capable of questioning the traditions they maintained. March 21st, 1858. I have learned that the entity's power can be broken, but only through a sacrifice of a different kind. One of the bound consciousness must willingly dissolve itself completely, breaking the chain that connects the living community to the parasitic force. This act would free all the trapped souls and leave the entity powerless to continue its deception. But it would mean true death, not the expanded consciousness I now experience, but complete oblivion. The diary ends with Elizabeth's recognition that she must make this ultimate sacrifice to save both the living community and the souls of all those who have been trapped before her. Her final entry, written in a hand that grows progressively fainter, describes her preparation for this act of self-annihilation. April 30th, 1858. I go now to face true death, not for the entity that has deceived us all, but for the genuine salvation of my community and all those who have been trapped in this endless cycle of deception. If this diary survives to be found by future generations, let it serve as a warning. Not all traditions are sacred, not all ancient wisdom is benevolent, and sometimes the greatest sacrifice is not giving your life, but giving up existence itself to save others from a fate worse than death. May God forgive us all for what we allow to happen in the name of faith and tradition. The archaeological team that discovered Elizabeth Hartwell's diary has spent the past 5 years attempting to verify her claims through historical research and scientific investigation. DNA analysis of the remains confirmed that she was indeed Elizabeth Hartwell, and carbon dating places her death in the autumn of 1856, exactly as described in her diary. Perhaps most remarkably, researchers have documented that the oak tree itself died within days of the diary's discovery. its massive trunk splitting down the center, as if something that had sustained it for centuries had suddenly been withdrawn. Soil analysis around the tree revealed traces of human remains from multiple individuals spanning nearly 2 centuries, evidence that supports Elizabeth's claims about the recurring sacrificial rituals. The town of Millbrook has struggled with the implications of these discoveries. Long-term residents report that many of the family traditions mentioned in Elizabeth's diary were indeed still being practiced as recently as the 1990s, though the participants claimed they were harmless cultural customs rather than elements of ancient rituals. Several families have discovered that their genealogical records contain unexplained gaps. Young women who simply disappeared during autumn months throughout the town's history. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's team has identified similar archaeological anomalies at sites throughout New England, suggesting that Elizabeth's claims about a network of affected communities may have been accurate. However, attempts to excavate these sites have been met with fierce resistance from local populations who claim the areas are protected historical landmarks. The diary itself has been subjected to extensive forensic analysis by experts from multiple disciplines. Every test confirms that the ink, paper, and handwriting are consistent throughout, despite the physical impossibility of the circumstances under which the final entries were allegedly written. Several scientists have abandoned their involvement in the research, claiming that continuing to study the diary was affecting their psychological well-being and their ability to maintain rational skepticism. Elizabeth Hartwell's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of consciousness, the persistence of ancient traditions, and the possibility that some mysteries are too dangerous to fully investigate. Her sacrifice, both in life and in her ultimate dissolution into oblivion, may have saved not just her own community, but countless others from perpetuating rituals they never truly understood. What do you think about Elizabeth's incredible story? Do you believe that consciousness can persist after death, or that entire communities can be manipulated by forces beyond their understanding? Have you ever lived in a place where you felt that the residents were keeping secrets from outsiders, or where local traditions seemed to carry an unusual weight of importance? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your perspective might help others process this disturbing tale, or even recognize similar patterns in their own communities. If this story has left you questioning the nature of reality and the hidden histories that might exist in your own area, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more documented cases that challenge our understanding of the world around us.